Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Bite Size Nutrition Podcast. Today, we are going to talk about hunger and specifically how to become a bit more sensitive to your hunger cues and how to overcome this fear of, well, if I listen to my hunger, then I'm just going to eat everything. I'm going to eat way too much. This is something that often comes up with the coaching clients that I work with, is that they have sort of two sides to this of either fear of getting hungry or fear of eating when they're hungry and often pushing meals back in order to save calories. And so through this episode, I want you to be able to use a few tools to be able to be more sensitive to your hunger and listen to your body without feeling like you're losing control. And this is very personal to me because one of the reasons why I avoided stopping dieting and macro tracking for so long is because I was afraid that my appetite was too big. It was scary for me to think like, oh, well, if I'm not tracking, I feel like I don't have control over how much I'm eating. And I thought that I would make excuses to not be accountable to the portion sizes that I knew I should be eating. And it turns out that as I built trust with myself, I found that that wasn't true. Because the fact of the matter is, I don't want to feel bad. I want to feel good. So that meant that it actually is in my best interest to eat in a way that aligns with feeling well. And a big part of that is respecting hunger and also respecting fullness. But we're talking about hunger because it is very difficult to stop eating at comfy fullness. It's very difficult to respect our fullness if we are not in touch with our hunger. And I want to normalize the fear of listening to hunger or connecting with hunger and being like, this is something that I feel like I can't trust my hunger. This is a product of a culture that has led us to believe that we cannot be trusted around food. When we were very, very young, we were completely intuitive. So kids are so intuitive with their hunger and fullness. This is why they will often eat a bite or two of something and then they won't eat any more. And as adults, we can also sort of ruin that in them. And maybe our parents ruined that in us by forcing us to eat everything on our plates or using dessert as a reward. And over time, we start to learn, oh, I shouldn't trust my hunger. I can't trust my hunger. It's going to get me in trouble, right? And so the two common patterns that I see when I work with coaching clients are avoiding hunger, so kind of constantly grazing or eating throughout the day so that you never allow yourself to actually feel hungry, or letting yourself get overly hungry because you have this clear idea of, oh, well, I shouldn't be hungry now. I should, only eat at these certain times, or feeling like if I respect my hunger, I'm going to eat way too much. And I want you to think about this. Hunger is a helpful signal that our bodies give us that we need nourishment. And nourishment is not always food. And we're going to talk about the four types of hunger because hunger that is a desire to eat something, it's not always based on my body needing physical energy. And when we understand that, we become able to respond to our hunger in a really empowering and mindful way. And we stop feeling like our hunger controls us. And I want to give an example from a client that I worked with. I'm just going to use the first initial of their name. So this client R had been tracking for years and was really good at sort of following a plan. But when plans changed, so let's say the dinner time changed or dinner plans changed, or they were invited out for a social event and they weren't in control of the food, that really threw this client off because they had no connection with their hunger cues. And in coaching, we've developed a sensitivity to hunger cues so that they can respond with flexibility, so that when things don't go to plan, it's not like, well, now I don't know what to do because I can't rely on this very strict plan that I had. They're able to be adaptable and flexible with their lives. And this client also stopped tracking without overeating. In fact, their overeating is at the lowest point it's ever been because they became more sensitive to hunger. So this is a really powerful example of how the more we try to control, the more it can backfire. But I want to give you a little bit more education around how hunger works so that you can use this in your own life. So we're going to make this just really, really high level overview. The way hunger works in our body physiologically is a little bit more complicated than this, but this is just so you have a really clear kind of like high level overview. So there are a few hormones involved in hunger. The main ones are ghrelin, leptin, peptide YY, and GLP-1. And some of these might ring a bell. GLP-1, because of the rise of Ozempic and Mounjaro and all of these things, we've been hearing about GLP-1 a lot, but it's actually a hormone that our bodies give us ourselves. Like we produce this hormone. So ghrelin, when ghrelin rises, that's when our hunger signals rise. So we might feel like growling in our stomach. We might feel an emptiness. We might be like losing focus because we're thinking about food. So when our bodies need fuel, ghrelin goes up and increases our hunger signals. Leptin is our kind of overarching fullness signal. So this is heavily related to our energy stores, so our body fat levels. It can be affected by if we're sedentary or not sedentary, if we have any kind of like chronic diseases. So leptin is kind of the overarching fullness hormone. But then when we eat food, what kind of affects us immediately is peptide YY and GLP-1. These are satiety signals that are released during eating, and GLP-1 specifically slows gastric emptying so that we feel full for longer, so that we're not immediately hungry right after we eat. And yes, these hormones can be disrupted or dysregulated. They can be affected by stress, lack of sleep, certain medications, um, certain health issues, or chronic diseases, and dieting. So the most common thing that affects our hunger and fullness signals is dieting. And when our hunger, like when we feel extra hungry because we're dieting, that's actually our body working as it's meant to work. Our bodies are not broken because we're dieting and all of a sudden we're super hungry. That is our body working how it's meant to work. And so one of the things that I often help clients do is re-regulate their hunger, because so many of the clients I work with have been in sort of a diet mindset for a very, very long time. So let's talk about the four types of hunger, because I mentioned earlier that only one of them is related to the physical need for food, but it's easy to confuse these. And so I like to help clients differentiate between these four types of hunger, because that gives us so much more power over how we respond to our desires to eat, which is really amazing when you are someone that you're like, well, I feel like I'm just hungry all the time. And you start to recognize, oh no, this is actually emotional hunger, or this is taste hunger. Then you have a choice on how you respond, right? So this is part of building a stronger connection with your body and your body's needs and what your body is telling you. Because our mind is part of our body, right? So the four types of hunger. Physical hunger, this is our body's need for energy. So this is, hey, it's been a few hours since I've eaten. I need energy. I need some type of nutrient. And it comes with physical signals. It usually increases gradually. So you might notice you're a tiny bit hungry, and then half an hour later, you're hungrier. And then you get to a point where you're like, I'm starving, right? It gradually goes up. Emotional hunger is when the nourishment that we need is actually more related to emotions than it is related to a physical need for food. So this can be a response to stress. This can be when you're feeling lonely or angry or tired. And often it comes on very suddenly. So out of nowhere, you have this craving, you have this need for food. A lot of the clients I work with also find that this is in response to like a task that they don't want to do at work. And emotional hunger is not satisfied through food. Emotional hunger is actually satisfied through attending to the emotion. We also have taste hunger. So taste hunger can also come on suddenly, but taste hunger is a really interesting one because it can be triggered by a smell, a memory, talking about food. You might be scrolling on Instagram and you see like a delicious meal and you're like, ooh, now all of a sudden I want macaroni and cheese. And a taste craving, or a taste, when we experience taste hunger, often that can be satisfied with just, ooh, I want the taste of chocolate. I have the taste of chocolate, and that's it. We often resist the taste hunger, and then it increases and it increases. Sometimes when we become more skilled in understanding our hunger and responding to it, we may notice, ooh, I have some taste hunger for chocolate. And we may choose to ride that out in a mindful way without telling ourselves no, simply making the choice to not react to that craving. And we may notice that the taste hunger rises and falls. The last type of hunger is practical hunger. And practical hunger is when you may choose to eat, even though you're not specifically physically hungry right now, but you're anticipating a future need. So, practical hunger is really about self care and choosing, hey, I might be in a 3 hour long meeting and I know myself well enough to know that I'm going to need food an hour and a half in. So, maybe I eat lunch now, even though I'm not physically hungry, so that I can anticipate my needs in the future. So, I want you to think about that these four types of hunger: physical, emotional, taste, and practical. And I want you to bring to mind, when was the last time you ate for physical hunger? How did you know it was physical hunger? When was the last time you ate based on emotional hunger? And how do you know that it was emotional hunger? Next, I want you to think about the last time you ate based on taste hunger, and how do you know it was taste hunger? And then when was the last time you ate based on practical hunger? So this is something I want you to take away from this podcast, is starting to think about your hunger in these categories so you can better understand it. And I want to give you a tangible takeaway. I want you to start doing more hunger check-ins. And I want you to consider that physical hunger sensations are not simply that empty feeling in your stomach. You may notice that your mood starts to change. You may notice that your focus, it's harder for you to focus when you're getting hungry. You may notice a tightness in your throat. You may notice like a tickle in your stomach before it gets really strong. You may notice a dip in energy, maybe a little bit of brain fog. All of these signs can be potential signs of physical hunger. What my physical hunger feels like is going to be slightly different than yours. And this is why it's so helpful for us to get to know ourselves, for us to be curious rather than judgmental. And so, before your next meal or snack, I want you to just pause and ask, what type of hunger is driving this desire to eat? Which of these four hungers, or maybe it's a combination, right? And then we can add in another tool. So we've got the four types of hunger, and the other tool is the hunger scale. The hunger scale, if this feels overwhelming, don't try it right now. But this is something interesting to keep in mind. This is a tool that I often use with coaching clients when we've kind of established what hunger feels like. And the hunger scale is from 1 to 10. 1 is like starving. Oh my gosh, I'm so hungry. I'm hangry. I would eat my own arm, right? Super hungry. 10 is actually the other end of the range, which is stuffed, right? So we call it the hunger scale. It's really a scale of hunger and fullness, all on the same range, right? And so we know that the far ends of the range are starving and stuffed. Ideally, we're starting to eat maybe around like a 3 or a 4, where we're not absolutely starving, but we're hungry. We have signs of hunger. That makes it easier to then stop at a comfy stopping point, which is usually around like a 6, 7, maybe an 8, right? I've also attached in the show notes for this episode, you can download a little guide to hunger and fullness. You have it's got the different signs of hunger, the different signs of fullness, and then a visual of the hunger scale. So you can go ahead and download that if you want. And I want to, before we wrap up, I want to give you some insight. Like, when do we not want to listen to hunger? Because I think there's this belief that if I'm a mindful eater, if you eat in the way that I recommend, maybe you're always eating when you're hungry and you're always stopping when you're full. And that's not true. Because it's not always about reacting to your hunger cues. This awareness, this hunger awareness, is more about giving yourself the opportunity to choose your behavior. Sometimes you might notice an urge to eat. You might recognize, ooh, this is emotional hunger. And you might say, like, this isn't what I want for myself right now. I don't want to be eating for emotional reasons. I'm going to choose not to eat, but I'm also going to choose to attend to my emotions. And if right now you're like, I don't know how to do that, we do a lot of work on this inside one-on-one coaching on how to cope with emotions without necessarily turning to food. You may notice physical hunger, and you may make the choice of like, hey, I know I'm going to eat in like 20 minutes, and I'm going to choose to just sit with this hunger a little bit because I know I'm going to eat soon. On the flip side, you may notice hunger and say, oh, dinner isn't for another hour and a half. I'm going to eat something now because I know that in an hour and a half, I'm going to be so hungry that it's going to be really hard for me to stop at comfy fullness. It's going to be really hard for me to eat mindfully, right? So it's not always about listening to hunger perfectly. It's about awareness so that you can make choices about how you treat yourself. And I want to normalize the fact that this is hard. This is not something that you listen to this podcast, you're like, I perfectly understand my hunger cues now. You are now relearning a skill that you unlearned through years and years and years and years of either ignoring your body or telling your body to shut up. And so, even noticing hunger a little bit earlier than before or being aware of it in a different way is progress. And this is such a big part of reducing a lot of your food noise. This is part of making eating feel like an easier thing to do because you're able to make choices instead of react. And this is part of building the long term self trust that I talk about so much with food so that you can make choices rather than react to your emotions or react to your body sensations or eat out of a place of fear. And it helps you break this feeling of like food is controlling me. So I want to leave you with that. And I also want to leave you with this idea of where this could go. So this can give you flexibility around food. This can help you walk into any situation. Be like, I know exactly what my body needs right now and how to respect that. And I don't need to stress myself out about control or restriction or any of that stuff. And this is part of the foundation. So being aware of hunger so that you can make choices is part of the foundation of what I help clients with in coaching. I mentioned that you can download a little guide to hunger and fullness in the show notes. And if you want personal support to put this work into practice, that's exactly what I can help you with in coaching. So I will leave you with that. I hope that you are going to take these tools and start recognizing the different types of hunger. Maybe start doing a little bit of a hunger check in before your meals and snacks. And I hope to see you back here next time for another episode. If you've been listening for a while, go ahead and leave me a rating or a review. That is super helpful for other people to find the podcast. Hopefully, it's a 5-star. And I will see you again next time.